Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. This is Asadullah Ali of the Andalusian Project coming at you today with a new web series titled Understanding Jihad with Robert Spencer. Now, this is a preface to my new series, and for those of you who aren't familiar with my channel, this is basically me attempting to summarize what I'm going to be doing and the intentions behind my series, the methodology behind my series, my intended audience, as well as what I hope to achieve from this series, and also a little bit about myself. So, to get started, if you haven't noticed from the title, this is going to be about jihad. This whole series is going to be about jihad, and I'm going to be using Robert Spencer as an assistant or a teaching aid. So, how am I going to do that? Well, for Christmas, my parents are Christian, by the way, my parents actually got me this book. I actually requested it. And it's Robert Spencer's recent book, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. And I was elated when I got this book. I was elated because it seemed to me that this is Robert Spencer's best work and his most comprehensive work to date. And it gives me probably the greatest insight into his mindset and what he thinks about jihad and his narrative and the conclusions that he's reached over the years of his, vast research into the subject matter. And I say that sarcastically, and you'll find out why in a moment. And I actually read this entire book within about 2 days. And I found numerous errors therein. And I felt that the best way to teach about the subject of jihad and to express a more objective analysis would be to basically do a lengthy book review and a deconstruction of this title. So that's basically what this series is going to do. It's going to be a full analysis and a deconstruction of Robert Spencer's recent work, page by page, video by video, and it's going to use a lot of supplementary material, including a lot of Islamic primary and secondary sources, a lot of academic sources, and very rigorous arguments. And my intention is to essentially teach about jihad, an objective understanding of jihad, through the Islamic perspective. Meaning, what does the Islamic perspective say about jihad? What is the orthodox Islamic perspective on jihad? What is the scholarly interpretation of jihad, the consensus surrounding it? And, what do the sources actually say? And this is very similar to Robert Spencer's methodology in that he attempts to appeal only to Islamic sources when making his arguments. So we're going to examine this book in detail, and by revealing all of the errors and a lot of the erroneous logical reasoning, I can then teach all of you, educate all of you about what jihad really is from the Islamic perspective. So that's my intention. It's not just simply going to be a refutation of this work, but it's going to be a teaching tool. And I attempt to do this through a rigorous academic presentation. So I will be using, like I said, many of the primary, secondary sources, academic materials, and I will be providing a full bibliography in every video, proper referencing, etc., etc., and of course, many logical arguments. That said, you're probably wondering, well, who's your intended audience through this? Well, my intended audience is basically everyone, not just Muslims. I intend to also make this presentation for non-Muslims who are on the fence about what jihad is, and I intend to make this a presentation for Robert Spencer's supporters and people who don't like Islam. Yes, I'm going to be reaching out to everyone in this respect, and I intend to be as neutral and as objective as possible in the presentation. I don't attempt to I won't attempt to insult anyone or to degrade anyone. I just want to give the facts and be as reasonable and rational as possible. For those of you out there who think I might be lying or, doing taqiyya, whatever, I will make sure to provide all my references out in the open so that you can go examine them. I will reference not just Muslims, but also non-Muslim scholars with respect to the subject. And I will, like I said, I'll be as comprehensive as possible so that there is no way that you can think that I'm lacking integrity at all. So that will be my methodology and my intended audience. So I hope that Robert Spencer supporters, you guys in particular, will, take my challenge and listen to the series and challenge your own beliefs with respect to what you think jihad is and what you think Robert Spencer is actually teaching you. So, I welcome also open discussion and debate, and I hope that this is challenging for you. That said, my intention, the conclusion that I want to reach through this series, the results that I want to reach, are that I will be able to change your mind by the end of it, or even in the middle of it, or maybe even the beginning of it. By showcasing the numerous errors in this book and in many of Robert Spencer's other works that will be supplementing this project, I hope that you are convinced that not only is he not an expert in this subject, despite claiming, vast amounts of knowledge over a period of decades on the subject of jihad and counterterrorism, etc., but that you will realize that he's deceiving you. And when I say deceiving, I mean that. And I know that sounds very harsh, but let me put it this way. When I was reading this work, I found not only several minor errors, like, a bad referencing, a bad research methodology, etc., but I found some major errors that put Robert Spencer's integrity in the spotlight and in doubt. And what do I mean by that? Essentially, what I found is that Robert Spencer practices something that we call the fallacy of suppressed evidence. And what is that? That is basically when somebody, when somebody intentionally and conveniently dismisses or ignores relevant information that undermines their conclusions or their the representation of the data. So what I found in his books, in this one in particular, is that he leaves out chunks and chunks of information, chapters worth of information that is not only relevant, but completely undermines his narrative. And for somebody who claims to be an expert, for somebody who claims to be comprehensive in their approach, this is damning. And it also casts doubt on his integrity. Because if he really is an expert, if he really did study the subject for several decades, then that information should be in the book, or in the very least addressed, or explained in some way. But it's not. It's conveniently left out in not just this work, but in all of his works. And that is extremely problematic, and that is unbecoming of somebody who claims to be a scholar on the subject. And it's unbecoming of someone who claims to have a strong argument. So I will be pointing out these errors and even counting them along the way throughout the series so that, eventually you'll realize that this is not a scholarly work and that Robert Spencer is not a scholarly person and that he is definitely not telling you all the facts. So by this point, you're probably wondering, well, who are you compared to Robert Spencer? I mean, who are you? You just seem like some random guy on YouTube. And that's a good question, and that's a relevant question, and I think, I should answer it. Well, firstly, my name is Asadullah Ali, as you probably already know. I'm a convert to Islam for about 11 years now. And I have a bit of an academic background. So firstly, I acquired my bachelor's degree in Western philosophy from the United States. I then went over to Malaysia and acquired my master's degree in Islamic philosophy. I then continued in a PhD program for Islamic studies while while minoring in counterterrorism. Excuse me. I then briefly worked with the Malaysian government. I was hired on as a civilian contractor for about 6 months, assisting the Malaysian government, the Malaysian military in particular, and the Royal Malaysian Police Force with researching and even arresting several ISIS affiliates and supporters within the country and on their borders. So essentially, I helped to fight terrorists while I was overseas. So I have a bit of a counterterrorism background, and this was during like 2016 to 2017. I then returned to the United States when my contract ended, and continued to pursue my PhD in Islamic Studies at the University of Georgia here in the U.S. And I just recently postponed that degree and am now acquiring my master's degree in Library and Information Science. So I have a bit of an academic background in this particular subject. I have a bit of a background in actual research and activism in counterterrorism. And, I have a bit of a background in making good arguments with my philosophy background. So, in many ways, I am not Robert Spencer, because Robert Spencer has none of these things. Sorry to throw some shade, but, that's just the truth. Now, that's not to say that I'm perfect by any means, or that there aren't people out there who know more than I do. Certainly, there are more qualified people out there to discuss the subject and to, review this book. That said, I think that I am qualified enough to deconstruct Robert Spencer's material and his views. So, once again, this is simply a summary of what's to come, and I hope that all of you benefit from this series as much as I will, and that you are educated and that I'm able to elucidate the subject coherently and in an entertaining fashion, in the very least. And that, like I said, you take away from this a broader perspective of the subject and, a more enriching understanding of the subject. So, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for challenging yourself. And thank you to even the Robert Spencer supporters. Thank you for being there and taking the time to listen to me and to take the challenge to possibly change your mind. Because if you're truly open-minded, then this should be something that you're interested in. Because I know many of you out there are wondering whether Robert Spencer has been properly challenged, and I hope this is the challenge you're looking for. So yeah, thank you all, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your time, and Jazakallah khaira. So until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take care.